Hello and welcome to another mini summer episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we're going to be doing a tier list of all the books that we have reviewed for this podcast. Chris and I have adopted a Palestinian family that is currently still stuck in Gaza. Mohammed's neighborhood was bombed and killed 22 members of his family, leaving him responsible for his 4 younger siblings who were pulled from the rubble. We will have their families' GoFundMe linked in the description, and they're very close to their goal, so please donate below. Don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter where you can get more information about us and the podcast. Um, and for more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LitLib Podcast. I'm your co-host Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms. Sorry, Mariah's a little low energy today.
If you don't know, we've been having some crazy weather. I know on TikTok people were memeing on it. That was like, oh, the news report says there's gonna be like crazy thunderstorms, and it was like if you look at the footage from Hillsborough, it was nuts. But we lost power, some like 15,000 buildings
Oh my
across
god.
the city. Yeah, it was crazy. So like where I was at, like 6,000 units lost power last night, and I work in memory care, so trying to keep people with dementia entertained,
With no
that was
TV,
that
no
was a lot.
iPad babies.
I know. You know what? You think iPad babies are bad, but imagine like seniors with dementia and they can't watch Titanic. Like it's that's their favorite movie, man, and I felt so bad. They're like, "Why can't I turn it on?" I was like, "I'm sorry. It's not working." Anyways, let's get into the tier list.
Okay, so
Kristen created this.
I created the tiers. I just made it up off my dome. I wanted them to be more fun than just like A B C D E F whatever. So starting with the lowest tier, we have the worst thing we've ever read. So, and I think some of these books could qualify for the worst things we've ever read that we reviewed specifically for the podcast. The next tier we have should have DNF. So these are books that we probably really couldn't even do an episode on, or that like we really necessarily didn't even enjoy, but we kind of just ended up reading and reviewing for the podcast. And then we just have mid, which is just like general, like didn't wow us, didn't disappoint us, just like run of the mill. And then we have inject this into our veins, which is just like basically anything that we loved but was not necessarily perfect. But we were like, yes, we want more stuff like this specifically for the podcast or in general in our reading experiences. And then finally, we have this altered our brain chemistry, which is just basically like any of these books that have changed our lives for the better, specifically for
If
the
I'm gonna
better.
be frank with you, I'm pretty sure this is just like Kristen's rating rubric.
Pretty much, I would say. I mean,
So I think that's funny because I'm looking at this and I was like, this is literally how Kristen is. So like the 0.5, 0.25 is like where
within,
it ranks. Like,
yeah.
I see it now. I see the vision.
So, because I mean, worst thing we've ever read, I don't necessarily think those should be DNF because sometimes you
Mhm.
get entertainment out of horrible things. Okay, so I don't think these are any in particular order. Um, by the way, because I just uploaded them all and then they all just went wherever they wanted to go. So that's that.
We can just start with the first one then.
Yeah, so
The yellow
first up we have the
wallpaper.
yellow wallpaper. For me, I mean, we have to discuss this a little bit, but I feel like we're mostly on the same page.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was mid, and I felt bad originally rating that when I had read it last year or year before. But I'm glad that Kristen is here to validate me.
Um, well, because whenever you recommended it, I thought you liked it. I'm not gonna lie. You made it seem like it was your favorite thing in the world, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this must be good." And I read it and I was like, "Well, how good could it be for a 30-page book?" As somebody who likes slow burn and long, drawn out things, this is very too much cut short that I wish there was more to experience where if there maybe was, I would have liked it more. Moving on. Well, do you have something else to say?
Mm, no, that's pretty spot on.
Okay. Oh, and now Brandon's playing Fields of Mysteria. It just
Brandon, are
popped
you
up.
playing your game?
I just got a notification that he is, so next up we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This is controversial because me and Mariah kind of have different opinions on this. Because I would probably inject this into our veins, but I know Mariah would put it in mid, probably.
Yeah, I think it's quite overhyped.
I'll put it at the
Because
top.
like
It's
people
the
like
best of the mid
talk. We can
categories that
change
are.
our mind, right, as we progress. Like some things might go in here and then we'll be like, okay, well now we have to move this up.
Yeah. But I mean, Mariah didn't very much like it. I wonder if reading more of the series would change your opinion on it too, because depending on how the rest of the series goes, because I think one of the best things about A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is I think the characters are like the main characters are so lovable
They're
that
very sweet. They are very sweet, but it was fine. It didn't kind of give what I wanted, which I don't know what I wanted. I went into it quite blind.
what do you want from a young adult thriller though? That's also like
That's the thing. I was like, I don't read thrillers, so I'm
so
gonna
we could put
take
it
the
in the
citrus
mid.
route
Yeah, we
where
could
I'm
put it
kind of in between.
okay. And then the next up we have Leather and Lark, which I think is another mid book.
The same way we can throw Butcher and Blackbird because they ended up being in the same
Do you want to
episode.
put them in mid or do you think
Yeah, they're both quite mid. Leather and Lark, I think or at least I did. I like Leather and Lark more, like the relationship dynamic rather than Butcher and Blackbird.
I can't remember what I rated either of them to be honest, like individually. I know they're both within like the 3-star realm for sure, but I can't remember like really. I think both of them are just very millennial and like with the last book with The Good Girl's Guide to Murder, it's too young for Mariah and then we have these two books that are like too old for me. It's like right in that like niche of like the zillennial split is where like I think these two books
Millennial
lie.
split.
Because, like, these books are so, like, cringy millennial, like, they make me upset to, like, think about and read.
I think it's because of like the dialogue. If she didn't use the type of dialogue and like made it a little bit more,
It's, like, very much like I'm
it need to be
adulting
elevated.
dialogue. It's
Yeah,
like
and I'm not quite on. I'm not with it.
and I do think that it's, like, overhyped in a way that it's, like, dark romance, and it's like, is it dark romance where your characters are or where your characters are just like vehicles to show trauma rather than these actually being dark twisted characters? Because I don't think any of these characters necessarily have like twisted intentions. I think they're all generally good people. They just have trauma and that's their issue.
And there's no growth.
No, they
They're
kind
kind
of
of
it's the
stagnant as
same.
characters.
I mean, I think I would argue Leather and Lark maybe has a little bit more growth versus Butcher and Blackbird.
Yeah,
But it's
I
not
would agree with that.
not very much, I don't think. Not, like, in a way that makes it better than the other. I think they're pretty much reading Butcher and Blackbird, I don't know what I expected out of Leather and Lark, but I guess I thought it would be better, and it wasn't, so I'm assuming that the 3rd book in the trilogy will probably end up being about the same for us. Um, Next up, we have Song of Achilles, which I don't think it's necessarily mid. You can argue
No,
if
I
it
would
is.
agree. It's injected into your veins. I thought it was really lovely. She's a great writer. Like
Mhm.
it's written very
Very
beautifully,
lyrically
but
written.
it wasn't as much as people made it out to be, at least for the time now. I think at the time it came out, I can see it,
Being
but
more
right now,
yeah.
it was
It
okay.
came out in 2012, and you can definitely tell it's a product of its time. It was very Tumblr-y in ways that, like, again, like, if I was reading this in 2012, this would have altered my brain chemistry. I would have been cooked. I would have been done. But the fact reading it as an adult in the year 2024, it just doesn't hit the same. Like, I feel like at least, like, most classics should hit. That's why I don't feel like this will necessarily be a classic, because it is very much a product of its time versus classics do last, like, the test of time. Moving on to the next duology, there is no devil and there are no saints.
Now, I think the debate with here is gonna be, is it's gonna go either in the should have DNF or the worst thing we've ever read.
I think the second one is should have DNF, but I think the first one is mid, to be honest. I don't think they're necessarily on the same. I think the first one could have been good as just a standalone. It would have been fine. It would have been mid. But the fact that it's a duology brings down the first book so much because the second book is just no plot whatsoever. It's literally just like we kill the bad guy. That is our plot.
It's incredibly lackluster,
And
and I
smut.
remember reading the second one and was just like, "What is this?" Because it doesn't, because they're supposed to be, like, fighting, like, the main antagonist, like, that's, I guess, the plot, like, what's
That's
going
literally
through it, whereas, like, the first one, you have, like, that, like, stalker romance. That's not in the second one because
they're
everything's been
together.
absolved,
Yeah.
and it's, like, contemporary romance with, like, a thriller under theme
But it's not even like a good thriller because
or undertone.
it's the problem is that like no offense like Sophie Lark, but I think these books are pretty predictable. I mean, I don't think how shocking can like a dark romance be because specifically it's a romance. You know they're gonna end up together and you know specifically romance typically means if something is classified as a romance book, it means that they're gonna have some type of happily ever after is like what classifies books as a romance book, whether it's a happy for now, happily ever after, or whatever. And so within these, it kind of defeats the purpose, and it's kind of more of a personal thing too because I'm not big into romance books where I necessarily care about people getting together unless I really love both the characters, and I feel like the male character, can't remember his name, uh, definitely was not lovable, and the main character, can't remember her name either, shows about how memorable the characters are. Just don't invoke anything in me to, like, feel like I should care.
But which book is the one that has, like, the anti-communist line,
The
though?
second
Is it the
one.
first one or the second?
It's the second
Okay,
one, specifically.
because
I
like,
know
that
that because
is,
yeah, because I gave that
okay.
one 2 stars. That was actually my lowest rate it's actually my lowest rated book that I've read this year, specifically in 2024. We have some books that we read in 2023 on this year list, by the way, because this is all that we've read for the podcast. But next up, we have The Jinn Daughter, and I feel like this could be inject this into our veins.
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't wanna put that in the very top because I think that's, the
The
it's so lovely the way it explores, like, the mother-daughter relationship, and it just, like, makes you want that.
I can see that, but I feel like I liked it more than Song of Achilles, but I don't think that it's necessarily altered my brain chemistry because I feel like I didn't rework the way that I think and where I'm constantly thinking back to this book. Where I feel like there's some other
Okay.
books within this tier list that's like every time I think about something, I somehow relate it either to the characters in a certain book or to like a storyline or a plot point or something specific within that book. So it didn't alter my brain chemistry in that way where I'm like thinking about
I
like
can see that.
referencing that. While this, I think it is a beautifully written book, just like Song of Achilles. I think it's a lovely book. I loved it. But that's why I was like, if I injected it into my veins, then I think that I would have like the content of that book being inside of me.
So, like, this altered our brain chemistry, it's gonna be, like, those 6-star reads.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
You have anything you want to say about the Jin daughter?
No, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
I'm just, we're getting the lay of the land.
All right, and then the next up we have the familiar. And like
Oh, fuck, man. I wanted this to be so good, and it's, like, sitting between mid and should have DNF'd,
I
and it's
agree.
so disappointing because,
I'm
in hindsight, I don't think about it at all. Like, there's nothing about this that made me happy.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in mid just because I don't think it was as bad as There Is No Devil. It was not horrible. I was entertained in some spots. It's just I've never been let down so hard by Lee Bardugo in my life, and so it was very hard to grapple with the idea of me losing her. Like, I felt like and I don't know if this just clicked for other people, but I feel like I saw pretty much middling reviews and stuff, and it's just really disappointing, I think, more than it's not necessarily like, that's why I don't think it's a shoulda DNF'd. I'm glad I read it, and I mean, I got an arc for it, so it holds some type of place in my heart, but it was just so much of a letdown, I think.
There was just so much hype around it too, like, I think we I didn't know anything about it, and I don't know that you knew a whole lot about it. We just knew it was gonna be, like, magic and,
and
like,
historical
historical,
fiction.
eh, but it was just for romantasy.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It was romantasy where it was necessarily I think it was romantasy and it felt almost too hard to be like a book talk book, and I bet the people that read it that are Six of Crows fans and things like that, the people that read it were Six of Crows and, like, Grishaverse fans. That's who read it. That's who Lee Bardugo's fan base is. While this book is not written for like, specifically, like, Grishaverse fans. This book is written for more general fantasy fans, and I don't think that this was in that general fantasy realm where I feel like maybe if it would've hit more, but I think just from Lee Bardugo, I was expecting a more complex magic system, more in-depth characters, I mean, all of her characters are the only memorable character is, like, the Darkling-esque character, the Centangle. He's the only one that's, like, relevant. Everyone else I feel like is very forgettable, and it's just I think it's overall a disappointing read, especially from Lee Bardugo. I think that might have been my probably, like, overall, it's my most disappointed read because I had the highest expectations for it, I think.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so, I mean, of course, you shouldn't really, like, judge books before you read them and stuff like that, but I think inherently we're all gonna do that anyways whenever we read, especially if it's from a beloved author like Leigh Bardugo herself. But I mean, like, even after reading this, I'm not turned off. Like, I'm not like, I'm never reading a Leigh Bardugo book again. It's just like it makes me more tepid about what her new
Like,
releases will
Ninth
be.
House and
Yeah.
stuff is gonna be about, like, and Hellbent.
Well, because I've already seen so many mixed reviews about Ninth House and Hellbent, but then also I'm like, maybe you guys just don't get Leigh Bardugo like I do. But then I'm like, maybe I don't get Leigh Bardugo because that would be so embarrassing. Because if you look at my shelf behind me, but I mean, the Grishaverse is just such a special place for me. Um,
It's like you're seeing it through rose-colored glasses or whatever.
yeah, but
But
I mean,
we'll continue that
yeah.
because it's gonna get to that point.
If you want our full in-depth thoughts, please go to the podcast episode link below. Just kidding. But we did it since there's all podcast episodes on these, if there's any of these that are like, "Oh, like, I want more information about," literally just go to any of the podcasts that we have. We've done all of these as episodes and have our full in-depth thoughts. The next up, we have My Year of Rest and Relaxation.
I think this should go in worst thing we've ever read, and despite the ratings that we gave it, it's this
So
is a really bad
boring.
lit fic. I, also think that maybe we're just not lit fic girlies and we
Okay,
just wanna be.
wrong, because I like Night Bitch, so I think
Okay,
I
you
have a
got
role
one.
in lit fic.
I like boy parts too, but the way it felt like pulling teeth to read this book, and people love it. It ranks so high amongst, like, lit fit girlies, like, list is, like, my year of rest and relaxation, and I don't know if it's because, like,
I'm
there's,
gonna
like, a
put it
lack of reading comprehension or
I'm gonna say
what.
instead of worst thing we've ever read, because I don't think it necessarily is the worst thing, but I think it should have DNF because I kind of wish we just didn't spend our time reading it. Like I wish we
Okay,
prioritized a different book over it. You know what I'm saying?
I'll give you that.
So like
Okay.
because like I
Okay.
read it and we liked it. It was fine, but like it kind of turned me off from a Tessa Mosh phase like, writing-esque, and so, like, I know, like, everyone she's, like, weird girl lit fic, that's, like, her whole thing, and, like, I've had some interest in reading Eileen and stuff like that, and so I'm wondering if maybe that would be better, but I think also with the main character being, like, bourgeois and, like, a landlord, we're, like obviously, like, with our Marxist tendencies, we don't like that, so I think that could kind of affect our realm of interest with this as well.
And, like, the overall direction ends up going towards the end. It just doesn't
It's
it
like,
doesn't land.
actually you can solve all your problems in sleep.
9/11.
Yeah, and you
You
can't solve
sleep
all
and
your
then
problems if you
9/11
sleep all
happened.
day. So, I think it's one of those books that also tries to be, like, shocking and weird girl, but then, like, to actually weird people, it's like, "Oh, well, I've read crazier than this," you know?
Mhm.
Moving on to Bride, and I guess this will be going into inject this into our veins, where I don't necessarily think it was mid. For, like, a romance book, I think it's pretty high on our list of enjoyment. for contemporary romance.
Only because it's supernatural. I don't know that I would rank it with A
Do
Song of Achilles and the
you
Gin
wanna put
Daughter,
it at
though.
mid?
I'd knock it down. Yeah, I think it's like it's definitely above A Good Girl's Guide to Murder for me.
I think it's less than that. I would put it like, well, because I'm not really sorting these by anything,
Oh, I
which
thought
I
you
guess.
were.
Oh, well, then this would go here. This would probably go like that?
Yeah, I think so. We'll
Okay.
go with that.
Well, now they're in order. Sorry, guys. I didn't know we were organizing them. Well, then should we put this here? This should go after. There we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
there we
Sorry.
go.
I'll put them in order
We
now.
need an accurate list for somebody that's so like I need like 0.5 star ratings. Like I think
Well,
it
I
might be
just
a little
thought we
bit
were
more
just saying our
meticulous.
general thoughts, but okay. Anyways, you can go
This
on and
went
jump
from
right.
mini episode to full blown episode real quick.
It's already been
Like
20 minutes. All right. Well, hurry up. Say what you need to say. Say what you need to
that's it.
say. Um, it was fine. I mean, I think Ali Hazelwood books are all pretty entertaining. I mean, I feel like the politics were mid, of course, so but it was fine. Next up we have Ring Shout, which I think is also gonna go into inject this into our veins.
Yeah, and I think it's above A Song of Achilles, but below the Gin Daughter.
I can
So
agree with that because the main reason why is because it's so short. I think we wish that we had because it's like what 150 pages ish, somewhere around there, less than 200. I'm pretty sure.
I just felt like there was so much potential and it could have served and been like Babel-esque, but obviously I don't think it would have like hit exactly there, but it was good. Like it was fun. The premise of it is so fun.
Mm. I wish it was longer, and I wish that I could have experienced it more rather than just being a one sitting read. I think this could have been great as like a whole like thing, you know?
But also this is like Kristen's philosophy is like more is more.
More is better, less is worse. Where they say less is more. No, less is less. Wrong. I want I love consuming long things. I mean, every book that I've read, you can look at like my story graph.
This is
Hardly
gonna
ever
get
read.
clipped.
I hardly ever read books that are less than 300 pages, just saying. And then next up, we have the best book we've ever read, Credence. Um,
Listen, there's a whole episode we literally can't because if we get into it, it's gonna be like a 4 hour long tier list.
just letting you know, we hated this, and it was probably I don't know. I don't know if I've ever read anything worse in my entire life, to be honest. Next up, we
It's
have
I think what makes it worse hold on, we'll just spend one second. One more minute, is that it's bad, and not because it's bad in itself, which it is. It's bad because people don't fucking get it, and they rate it like a 5 star read, and that blows my mind, and it makes me more angry,
it
and I
tries
think
too
that's why
hard
I
to
think it's bad.
be it tries too hard to be like something that it's not, where it's like, "Oh my god, it's this whole like discussion about this young girl finding herself after not being loved by her parents." But in reality, it's just a way for the author to share like a minor getting harassed by her step family, basically,
Yeah.
and a
She's trying
vehicle
to
for
sell you
smut.
that, like, incest can be okay if you're not
Blood
biologically
related.
related, but the age, differences in grooming, that's fine.
Yeah. Moving on.
But, yeah.
Crooked Kingdom. I don't know where
Okay,
Mariah is
Crooked
gonna
Kingdom
rate it.
and Six of Crows should go in the top.
Yes, I agree. I think Six of Crows is better than Crooked Kingdom. Just saying. W-
Anyways.
No spoilers, but Six of Crows quite literally changed my life. My cat right here, he is named Kaz after this duology. So that shows you anything on how. I mean, if you look behind me, you
It
can
just really
see.
sets the idea of, like, what a heist storyline can be with, like, a romance subplot, but, like, it's slow burn, and
Hmm.
it's just lovely. It's just a really lovely book, and it's nice and diverse. The magic system's already established if you've already read, like, the Grishaverse, like, the beginning, like, Shadow and
Shadow and Bone
Bone
trilogy.
trilogy, but even then, you don't need to. I think that's what makes it so nice is you could just hop into this one, which I think
Yes.
Kristen and I would recommend, is that you just hop directly
Yeah,
into
I
this
would say
one
start with
and
Six
then
of
go
Crows.
back.
If you really care about the stories, which moving on into our next two books, which is the King of Scars duology, which I don't know if Mariah
Throw
necessarily
that shit
rates.
into the top.
This shit fucking slaps. Oh my
I do
god.
think it goes above Six of Crows, though.
Okay,
Like,
well,
Rule of Wolves for sure is, like, the top runner right now.
I do not agree with that, but I think King of
Really?
Scars is I like King of Scars more than I like Rule of Wolves. I'll do this. I'll put King of Scars here though, like that.
Okay.
But I do
I'll
this
give you that one.
I do like I think Six of Crows is just so perfect because I love the introduction to all the characters and stuff like that. But then with the King of Scars duology, the way that it builds on every character that was in like the Shadow and Bone trilogy and in the Six of Crows duology, that it builds on all of those characters in such a beautiful way, and it gives them such a great, like, not great ending obviously because like half of these books follow like a war, but that's all like still like just such a like great fantasy, and I can't believe this is considered like young adult. Like I feel like this is the most adult young adult fantasies I've ever read. I've read better, like this is better than some adult fantasies that I've read, you know?
Yeah, I can agree because and I read like adult fantasy as well, and like, sometimes you can tell when it's like a YA, like you can tell like the way that they talk, the dialogue, which I think like Six of Crows and whatnot, like the dynamic, but they're also younger, so
Yes.
it makes sense like why
Why they
they talk the way they do. Whereas Rule of Wolves and King of Scars is just so much more elevated.
Mhm. I
It's
love
just good.
and obviously I'm biased because, like, The King of Scars and Rule of Fools geology, like, specifically follows, like, Nikolai, which is, like, literally my favorite character from, like, pretty much almost one of my favorite characters from, the overall whole Grishaverse and stuff like that, and finally getting to focus on him and his arc, I think is such a powerful thing. Next up, we have Uprising.
Oh god. So this if you are seeing this, I don't know at what point this is going up because this might be like a main episode. I love
It
this.
w
I
This will be
It's
after.
a reference. It is like the new Babel for 2024. It's not as good as Babel,
I'll put it at the end of
but
my
it
favorite
is
big
it's
ranking
great.
history. I agree. I think I ended up giving it like 4.5 stars, I think, because I pretty much rated it around these two books, the Jen Daughter and Ring Shout, because I can sort of see like the Babel S because there is positive socialist messaging and things like that, where that can be such a great thing and such a hard thing to find in literature, especially nowadays, and being like American and finding like American literature that shows positive representation of socialism is pretty much like stamped out. So it's very good in that messaging. But I do think this necessarily doesn't hit as hard and I as like Babel, and I don't know if it's just because it's young adult. But we're doing a full episode on this like today. The full episode for this will be up before this tier list is out because the full episode will be out this Thursday. Mariah, and this will go up next Thursday. Just so you know. So you could cut
Okay.
that out. But um so by the time this is up, our full review is out. But I think we overall enjoyed this where Mariah's saying it's the Babel 2024. I'm still on the look for my Babel 2024. Which might just end up being like the Poppy War, you know?
Which I do think the Poppy War is gonna rank high. It just depends on her depiction of Mao.
Yeah.
That is what it's leaning on because I know a lot of people don't like Mao. So that I
I
get
have a whole
worried when
like
people are
mouse
like
section right here on my bookmarks too. Um, okay, moving on, Shadow and Bone trilogy, where I am
Mm.
going to rate.
I like the first one, I like the second one, and then the third one
This is how I
makes me
would rate
so
them.
mad.
I think the problem is I love Siege and Storm, and I'm obviously biased because that's the one where Nikolai is introduced. And honestly, it's a hot take. Everyone hates Siege and Storm, which I don't know why. How stupid can you be? Literally, Nikolai is.
I
Anyways,
think it's because they spend so much time at the school, and, like, I don't know, maybe people just don't like that, whereas, like, Shadow and Bone, you're kinda, like, getting into it, and then it ends with, like, the fold and the Darkling.
yeah. So it's like a cliffhanger ending because basically, I think Alina gets captured. But
No,
she
she
gets
runs
captured,
away
yeah, she
with
gets
Mao,
away with
and then
Mal,
she
and then
gets
she gets captured
captured
right
at the
at the
beginning
beginning
of
of
the
Siege and
first
Storm,
second one.
yeah.
Yeah, so, like, it's just a really good journey because you get the whole whatever the altar things that they get, like, that's, like, done at the beginning.
Mhm.
So you get that out of the way, and it's just kind of character dynamic, and you get some nice romance, and it's really lovely. And then Siege of Storm or the what is it,
Ruin and
Rise and
Rising.
Ruin
Ruin
Rising?
and Rising.
She really fucked it all up there, and that pisses me
I
off
think
because
it
I was reading
just
it and it was good. But
The
it
first
just didn't serve what Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdoms. Like, what the fuck were you thinking
I think
when you
it's
wrote
just
this?
disappointing because, like, especially, like, the first half of the book, they're, like, underground in a cave, and they're just walking around for, like, 150 pages or something. So you're kinda like, "Okay," like, I'm waiting for something to happen, while it's a lot more, like, exposition, I feel like, because she kinda just felt like she needed to write, like, a full-length novel to finish out this trilogy, where I do think Shadow and Bone should have been a duology, which I feel like Lee Bertigu learned from her mistakes with making King of Scars a duology and Six of Crows a duology. Where she coulda, like, split Siege and Storm in half, basically, made Shadow and Bone, like, Shadow and Bone, and then, like, the first half of Siege and Storm sorta, like, basically, and then, like, Siege and Storm the second half of Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising being its own duology, I feel like that would've worked a lot better. And then next up, we have The Pinnacle of Reading. Best thing we've ever read in our
Babel.
entire lives.
We
I don't think I've read a better
it's
book, to be
it's
honest.
a
I
perfect
still
book.
haven't. Um,
Everyone that says anything bad about it,
they're
they're
stupid.
wrong.
They don't know what's going on, they have no thoughts in their head. This book changed my life. I think about it quite literally, not even joking, every day. Like, I think about Six of Crows every day, but I think about Babel every day. Like, every hour, I'm thinking about it. Like, everything, I'm like, "Oh my god, this could have happened in Babel," and I felt like I learned so much. I mean, me and Mariah both like learning. That's, like, one of our favorite I guess I don't know if you would call that a hobby, but we both like learning, and so I think that's one thing about, like, Babbel, it requires you to learn. Like, I learned so much about language, I learned so much about, like, the Opium Wars and things like that versus, like and that's what makes it so much better than King of Scars and Six of Crows, is that, like, we love those books, but there's not really a learning aspect of it. You're not learning anything new, you're not building on knowledge that you already have, versus Babbel does give you that, I think.
Yeah, it's just so nuanced, and I know some people say that it's pretentious, the way that she went around it with, like, the notes at the bottom or something, it felt, like,
I loved it.
redundant, like, she was but it was nice, it made it feel almost like academic work,
It felt
and I
like you
think if
were
you don't
reading
like academic work, then it's a problem, like a historical telling of this, and then you get, like, the inserts, and it was
it
nice, it was
it
a really
almost
good.
felt like a nonfiction fiction book, I feel like.
Mhm.
In the way that, like, obviously it was fiction because there's magic and stuff like that, but with the way that you learn so much, because I mean, you still learn so much about language and, like, just history in general because it is a historical fiction and, like, striking and things like that, which is why I think there's no way you can compare Uprising to Babel just because of that, like, the way that it's implemented, and I think Uprising, because it did come out in, like, 2007 or whatever, that, like, it makes sense that I do think Babel is a much more elevated and adult version of Uprising, as a compliment to Uprising, not to diminish it.
Yeah, I think, like, if you want to get, like, your kid to read something to understand, like, the
As
emotional
middle school
gravity of,
kid, I
like,
would say.
yeah, like a middle school kid. I think this should be like one of those books that they recommend to kids like they read like with The Outsiders and like
Mhm,
Ender's Game. I think Uprising should be on that list as well because I think it's just so nice. It's such a good read
you
for kids to and you can start such a nuanced conversation around it whereas like Babel I think is a little bit too much because I didn't even know about like the opium wars until I was like a young adult. I
mhm,
don't remember learning about that in high school. Or if we did, it was kind of glazed
passing,
over.
yeah. Um, Next up, we have The Silent Patient, which Imma go with I think that's also mid.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think
And we don't have a whole lot to say
it's not very
about The
memorable.
Silent Patient.
It's
It
fine.
was fine, I
Well, I
guess.
think it's better than these, I'm not but it's just
Yeah,
fine. Typical
it's
thriller.
fine. You can get through it quick. This is how you lose the time war, though. I don't know.
I
I
don't
think
know.
you liked it more than I did because I wish I would have DNF'd it,
That's what
TBH.
I was thinking too because, like, I feel like I don't know if maybe I'm too stupid to get it, but it definitely like, the criticism for Babbel, take them and give them to This Is How You Lose the Time War. Like, that's how I think it should be, where I do think it's lyrically written, but I feel like it's just tries so hard to be lyrically written, half of it ends up going over your head.
I have heard that people say that books that have dual authors tend to land like that. Like either it's really good or it doesn't translate right and it feels kind of janky. And I did feel like this was that way and it didn't land. Even though like the whole premise of it, like if we were to tell you the plot line of it and explain it, you would love it. You would be like, oh, this is sounds like such a great book. But in order to get to that point, you have to sift through so much stuff and try to figure it out along the way, and it's not
A lot more of, like, a
enjoyable.
detective story where you're trying to figure out what's going on half the time, you know?
Rereading paragraphs over and over again because I'm just trying to figure out, I was like, "Okay, this is nice, but, like, is there, like, a hidden
Like,
meaning to
what
this?
is
Like, this
the
is play to the plot?"
like, what's at the actual, like, thing happening is that you don't really get that, you're kind of more reading since it is kind of, like, as letters to people, it's like you're reading, like, one letter to somebody and one letter to another, is that you're kind of just, like since you're just reading letters, you don't get much plot either, where it's, like there is, like, the overarching plot of, like, these 2, like, time like, I don't know, companies
Agents?
or whatever. Well, they're like the companies are, like, going against each other, and so the agents are against each other, but the agents fall in love, and so you're like, "Oh, like, this sounds nice," but then it's also like, we're just getting, like, the secondhand knowledge where I wish maybe I think I would have been more interested and I say this all the time, I think this would have worked better as a TV show, where you could actually get the overarching plot of, like, the agencies going against each other too, besides just, like, the 2 people falling in love. Next up, Tender as the Flesh. I think this is another
I think
DNF.
I'm surprised you didn't put that in the worst thing you ever read.
I mean, I didn't I mean, I know it was on, like, my bottom 3 books last year. I think it was. I think it was,
But
like,
it's
the
not
3rd.
worse than
It's
Credence.
not worse than
It's
Credence, but it's not
Here's the thing with Tenders of Flesh. I think part of the reason that it doesn't land right is, like, a translation issue because,
yes.
the main character, I think she's from, like, Argentina
I
or
think the original language is Spanish. I don't know where she's from,
because
but
yeah, so it's originally Spanish, so, like, we have some, like, language disputes, so I don't think it can fully
be
in the vein of Babel, we learn a lot about, like, language and how, like, language is construction, like, linguistics.
and
So
I
it's
don't
just not like
the full meaning might have not came across how it comes across
it's
if you
supposed
speak
to be
Spanish.
critiquing, like, capitalism and, like, the meat industry and exploitation, which is fine, but the way it kind of ends up at the very end, it was kinda
It was,
lame.
like, tried
I
too
do
hard to be
think
thrillery at the end, I think.
if you want a really short, sweet, kind of, like, empathy, but also gross book, there's a book called Mary, and it does the same thing in, like 10 pages.
It's 7 pages, I think, because I was on, like,
It's
the
7 yeah, it's like 7 pages. It's very short, and it will if you wanna have some sort of empathy for animals, I'm like, just read that. It's I'm gonna read her new book though when it comes out, and I'm gonna give it my full thought because I tried to read the second one, like the 19 Crows and Blackbird or whatever,
when you DNF that.
and I DNF'd it. I
Yeah.
did not like it.
So,
So we'll
the
see.
next
We'll
step,
see.
we have the Housemaid trilogy, and I think this is how we would do them. Well, I guess I think these are
I mean,
better
I
than, like
rated the Housemaid higher than the second one.
well, I think I rated the second one higher, so we're gonna have to split the difference and keep it in mid.
Yeah, that's fine. And then the Housemaid, I don't know where she went with that. Like this whole series or trilogy was just fucking stupid.
Felt money grabby towards the end, where I think the beginning it did have an interesting private presence, but then towards the end it just kind of felt like, oh, like this is my most popular book series. Let me keep writing about these characters.
I really hope it's done and she doesn't try to do like a spin-off.
Well,
That'd be
we're
really
still
dumb.
hoping. Next up we have Masters of Death, and I'm gonna put this into inject this into our veins, which I know might be controversial if Mariah thinks something different. I did give this a 5 star. I do love this book, but I just don't think it's necessarily on the same level as any of these up here. I do think it's better than
No, I do think it's oh, I'm surprised. Hold on.
maybe before Song
I
of
think it's in between, yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say, I think it's in between Ring Shao and Song of Achilles.
That's what I
These are
agree too.
very controversial.
Yeah. Um, but Masters of Death, it's a beautiful book. It's the problem I think it is a little bit confusing, like, written how, like, how you lose the time war is, like, lyrically, but I think it works for Masters of Death because you do get an overarching plot as well, where it's not all of the paragraphs are super, like, lyrically. Well, like, the problem with This Is How You Lose the Time War, every single, like, page is written where you're trying to transcribe it, while Masters of Death just has few sections that are like that, I feel.
Yeah, I can feel that.
The
Perfect
Perfect
Marriage.
Marriage. I think this is about
Did you like it more than the Patient? Okay.
I think I did like it more than Silent Patient, but I think
'Cause that one was interesting, and I think that one's
that's where I
worse
think
than The
it should go.
Housemaid.
You think this one's
Okay,
worth I
that's
think
good.
okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
that makes sense.
I mean, I thought the ending was surprising for it. I was not expecting it, and I mean, what more can you what more do you want about a thriller than just like an ending you didn't guess? You know?
Yeah, it takes you by surprise
Which I
in a
enjoy.
really
Yeah.
nice way. So,
Next.
if
Oh, do you have
I was
anything?
gonna say, if you really want a thriller, I think of all the thrillers, The Perfect Marriage was
This
probably,
is
like,
the
the
best
most,
book
like
talk thriller, like adult
that we've
thriller, I
read.
would say. Coraline.
Okay, so we're gonna do this very delicately because we love Coraline. However, Neil Gaiman is a fucking weirdo.
Hate that guy. Freak.
I don't know why did he have to I also just found out that he, like, sexualized the TARDIS and said that she's a woman that just, like, wants to fuck the Doctor. I don't know.
I
That's
mean,
what I'm
I
saying,
know,
man.
like, in Doctor Who, like, technically, I think the TARDIS is, like, gendered as a girl, but I thought it was gendered as, like, a girl, like how, like, oops, like how all ships are girls, you know?
That's
Like
what I
that sort
thought,
of
but no,
esque.
he had to take it to that next level. He's not good, and
We don't
Coraline is
support that
just like a
author.
childhood staple.
Yeah, I read this in the 4th grade, I think, whenever the movie came out. The first movie came out, I had to read it before I watched the movie, and I thought it was I was never as scared of it that I think other people were, and so, like, as an adult, I've read it, and it's, like, scary, but it's not, like, scary, you know?
But as like a kid, it's a very unnerving book. Like my 10-year-old won't read it.
I was not scared as reading it in elementary school. I was like, "Damn, this shit is fire." I thought it was cool. But I really like Coraline, it just sucks that the author has to be such a horrible person, and, of course, we didn't discuss that in the episode because nothing controversial was out about Neil Gaiman at the time, so whenever we talk about our praise for Neil Gaiman, that's all been wiped away, just so you know. And finally, we
A lot
have
can happen in a year.
yeah, last book, Haunting Adeline. Um, I fucking hated Haunting Adeline. The episode I think we did was really good. I bullied that book for like an hour. Probably the best thing I could
That
have
was
ever
our
done.
very first episode that got
Yes.
posted. See, I think Kristen doesn't realize I just recommend books to Kristen to read for the podcast, not necessarily because they're good or bad, because I think it'll yield a very interesting response from Kristen.
I'm very passionate about my thoughts and appealing feelings and opinions. I just want to say Haunting Adeline originally got 5 stars from Mariah. So if anybody wants anything to bully Mariah about, she liked Haunting Adeline until I bullied her into not liking it anymore. Just saying.
I went through it was like one of the first books as like dark romance
It was
back
like one of the first fiction
early
books you
last year.
read, wasn't it? Like
Yeah, because we did, like, the whole ACOTAR, we did SJM, like, the whole thing, and I was in the middle, I was like, "Oh, like, I don't know what dark romance is," but I was like, "Sounds interesting, I've never heard of, like, a stalker romance," and I read it, and I just, like, was glued, I couldn't look away, but now in hindsight, it's just, like, a train wreck that you can't look away from, and I think the first book is interesting because there's, like, a spooky element, like, there's, like, ghosts, but then
mhm.
that plot line just dies, like, she just takes it and throws it away, she's like, oh, well."
I've never even read the second book in the duology, and you can ask Mariah, that is very unlike me. I'm a very much a completionist, and so, like, if I start a series, I mean, like, There Are No Saints and There Are No Devil, like, I didn't like the first. I liked it, I thought it was fine, but, like, I still finished the second one, but, like, even for Haunting Adeline, I couldn't even read the second one. I thought this was such a waste of my time, and it's, like, so fucking long. It's, like, 500 pages. Why?
I know, I did it in, like, a day and a half or something crazy, like,
Freak.
it was like when I first got my Kindle too, because it was on Kindle Unlimited, and I think that's part of the reason. I was just like, "Oh, wow, look at all these free books. I saw this on TikTok."
But that is our definitive ranking of all the books that we've read for the podcast. Um, all of these episodes will not be linked below. You can just go to our Spotify or our YouTube or wherever you listen to our podcast, and all of these have episodes within them. So if you want our full discussion on them, I think some of them may have changed like after reading them a year ago and then like comparing our thoughts now. But I think objectively, this is how we feel. And if you guys want us to do more tier rankings of books that we read, we can do one of these every year. Um, Other than that, do we have anything else?
No, I think this is really solid. We'll probably do this annually because this is like the end of our like summer mini episodes. We're
Mhm.
going to do another series in the winter so that we have something else. We'll get some mini episodes where we'll keep up with some pop culture things or like I don't we probably won't do one of these.
Yeah.
But we will have our end of the year wrap up, which I think is going to kick off
Mhm.
our winter series, and that'll be coming out like January 2nd, I
Yeah.
think is like the
Beginning of
tentative
January, yeah.
timeline. So if anyone has any suggestions for ideas, we have plenty of time between now and then to go over topics.
Anything you wanna hear us talk about or anything that you felt like we didn't discuss enough, like, in these mini episodes? I mean, I think we really enjoyed the mini episodes. If you guys like the mini episodes, let us know. I think they're a little bit more accessible for the podcast rather than just us talking specifically about books we've read. But other than that, thank you and good night.